Hi there and Happy New Year! This is Jenna from scribblinggrace.com, and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted a watercolor sunrise in my journaling Bible. So this is actually a really simple technique. I'm just going to be using mainly the wet on wet technique for this page. I'm going to be using my Kiritake Ganso Tambi watercolor set, a large round paintbrush. Any large round paintbrush will do. Really, a flat brush could work as well. I have a clean glass of water and then a Tombow Funosuke brush pen for later on to add my lettering. I'm just putting down a piece of printer paper underneath the pages I'm going to be working on to protect the pages below it. Especially since I'm going to be using a lot of water, I want to make sure that none of that watercolor is going to seep down into the rest of my Bible pages. I'm also going to be using, I just showed you really quickly, it's just masking fluid, also known as liquid frisket. And I'm just going to use this really quickly with an old paintbrush to draw a little circle for my sun. This masking fluid is basically kind of like a glue, and you paint it onto your page and then let it dry, and then you can paint over it with your watercolor, and then at the end you just peel the masking fluid off and you'll get that blank page that you began with. So that's going to give me a nice white sun. So I just painted that with an old brush. You want to make sure it's an old brush because masking fluid can tend to ruin paintbrushes. So I just used my heat gun to dry it really quickly because you do want to make sure that masking fluid is completely dry before you start painting on top of it. And now I'm just taking my paintbrush and painting, starting with a yellowy orange. All around my sun to be the lightest area of my page. And I purposely did my sun around the verse that I'm working on, which is Lamentations 3 verses 22 through 24, which says, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him." And I thought that this verse was a really great one to start off the new year with. So that's why I chose this verse specifically for this new year page. Happy 2020. So now I'm just adding in some more colors. I'm trying to do the wet on wet technique, but if you've been Bible journaling before, if you've ever used watercolor on a Bible journaling page, you can't really use it just like you would on watercolor paper. It just is thinner paper, and it doesn't have any of that grittiness. It doesn't hold the paint as well, and it doesn't hold water as well. So it dries really quickly, and you can't really do the wet on wet technique, but you're gonna do kind of what you can. So basically, you just take a clean paintbrush, wet the page, and then you go back over with some color into those wet spots to try to get it to blend well together. So you could see when I added that blue that it spread out where the page was still wet. And I'm just taking a napkin to kind of dab up the color that was a little too much color for me. So I just dabbed that up with a paper towel. And I'm just going to keep on adding in some color. So nearest my sun, I did the yellow, then I did pink, and then I did a blue color. I actually used two different blues from my Kiritake set. One's a gray blue and one's another blue. I'll try to find the names and put those in the blog post that goes along with this video at scribblinggrace.com/sunrise, so you can find all the links to the supplies that I'm using there, as well as other helpful tutorials and other little tips. So be sure to head on over there, and I'll put that link in the description below. So I put this is my first layer. Once I was somewhat happy with where the colors were, I decided to let it dry, because if you're adding, it's all going to blend together. So we want to make sure that we're doing layers. That's one of the key things to watercolors, to work in layers. So I think that this first layer is actually pretty on its own, so you could definitely stop here. But I decided to go ahead and dry the page with my heat gun. You could also let this air dry. One of the questions I get a lot is if you can use a hair dryer. Essentially, you can. The difference between a heat gun and a hair dryer is that the heat gun gets hotter and it doesn't blow as much air. So a blow dryer will blow a bunch of air, which if you're using the wet on wet technique like I did in this page, or you have lots of globs of watercolor, using that blow dryer that pumps so much air out can tend to spread those globs of watercolor around. So the heat gun doesn't do that because it doesn't have as forceful of air come out. So if that makes sense. And here I went ahead and I'm just rubbing off that masking fluid that I added on now that it's all hardened, so I could just rub it off with my fingertip. You could also use an eraser, and I have that nice white sun. And now I'm going to go ahead and start adding another layer in. So at this time I'm starting with my blue because I want to make sure that I'm getting those edges a little bit darker. And I'm just adding in color, and if it's too much, just dabbing it away. I did use a lot of a couple napkins for this, so paper towels work better, but I didn't have any paper towels on hand, so I just used an old napkin, which works too. And again, just dabbing in the color with my round paintbrush, adding in water to kind of let it seep around a little bit, and then dabbing that off with the paper towel or napkin as I see fit. I wanted to make sure that I could still read all the text on this page, so that's why I am dabbing my colors so much, because I don't want them to be too dark or vibrant on the text so that I can't read it anymore. But that, of course, is a totally personal decision and just something to keep in mind. So I'm just adding in more color. As you can see, I went a little bit over my sun there because I wanted that sun to kind of fade in a little bit more rather than just being a stark white round sun compared to the yellow. I just wanted it to blend a tiny bit, so I just went over that really lightly with a lot of water and a little bit of that yellow color. And there's really not a huge ton of technique that I can show you for this. I'm hoping that watching it you can kind of just get a better idea of how I went about this and how you could do this as well. I wanted to do sunrise colors, so of course that's yellow, pinks, blues, purples too could work, oranges. You know, skies are so beautiful. So if you're doing this, I hope that you would give this a shot and go for it in the way that you see fit. So change up the colors as you want. You could do an all yellow and pink sky. You could totally use your creativity and have fun with this. From here on out, this was my second layer, and I decided to kind of stop at this point. But if you wanted to add more detail and more depth and more definition, you could definitely add more layers and more layers. And just be sure that you dry each layer with a heat gun, or you let it air dry before adding the next layer, and you can create a lot of depth and definition to your page. I decided just to keep it here, keep it simple, because this is just Bible journaling art. I'm not trying to create anything super duper crazy fancy, so I just want to have fun and enjoy the word and meditate on the scripture that I'm working on, which again is Lamentations verse 3, 22 through 24. So now that my page is dry, I also do want to note that I used a lot of water, so you can see it is a little crinkly. I personally have no problems with that. I don't mind if my page is crinkly because I find that after a few weeks closed in my Bible, it flattens back out. I do know some people that will put paper towels on either side of their page and iron it on a low temperature, and you can iron it out back to straight if that's something that really bothers you. I personally kind of love the feel of the crinkly pages, so I don't mind it at all. But that's something to keep in mind. I also do not prep my watercolor pages with gesso. I hardly ever prep my page with gesso. I find that if you try to do watercolor on top of gesso, it really just reacts very differently. But gesso can help to protect your page from tearing and stuff. And when you're using a lot of water like I just did, the page does lose some integrity. So you do want to be very careful not to tear the page. Or you could prep your page with gesso, which I don't love, but a lot of people do. So that's something to keep in mind. Do what you feel is right. You also, if you don't want to go over the text at all, you could totally keep this to just the margins of your page. I'm using the ESV single column journaling Bible for this page, but really any journaling Bible can work. I personally don't have any bleed through with my Kuretake Gansei Tambi watercolor set. And the pen that I'm using, the Tombow Food no Suke, which again, I'll put all the links to the supplies that I'm using in the blog post goes along with this video at scribblinggrace.com/watercolor sunrise. And I don't have any bleed through with these problems. I'll show you the back side of this page in just a second. But if you're using other watercolor brands or other pens, you may want to prep your page because not all watercolor brands are the same. So some will bleed through and some won't. So I just added my lettering with my Tombow Food no Suke. If you've been here for a while, you know that I do brush calligraphy on almost every one of my Bible journaling pages. And I have tutorials on how you can do those. Again, I'll put those links in the blog post goes along with this video. And you also could totally use stamps or stickers, whatever is your fancy, to do some lettering. And then I just used a small micron pen to write out a prayer. Sorry, my hair kind of blocks the way there. But I just wrote out a simple prayer for the new year and dated my page on the side. And then I took a white gel pen and went back over my lettering here, my prayer, just to kind of make it a little more secretive and make it blend in with the sky, kind of like a cloud, to just keep my prayer a little bit between me and God, maybe. And then I went ahead and added a little bit of highlight to my letters above as well. So on the right side of all of my downstrokes, which is where the letters are the thickest, I added a little swipe of that white gel pen as well. And that's it for my page. So I know I talked a mile a minute in this video, but I hope that you still enjoyed this tutorial. And I'll show you the back side of this page really quickly as well. You'll see that there's no bleed through. There is a little bit of ghosting from the pen on the back side. That's just code for shadow, but there's no bleed through. So if I wanted to work on this back page, that would be no problem. I wouldn't be able to, once you work on that backside, you don't see anything. It's easy to cover up. So no bleed through, no page prep, easy peasy. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And be sure to check out that blog post at scribblinggrace.com/watercolor sunrise for the supply links and other tutorials and all that fun stuff. I am praying many blessings upon you and much love, joy, peace, happiness, and good health to come. Hope that you have a wonderful year ahead. All right, God bless.